Please note that in this show you might hear graphic descriptions or language that may not be appropriate for everyone. Listener discretion advised. Welcome to Parentless Podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Relaford. On this show, we're going to be speaking with others who have experienced the loss of one or both of their parents or parental figures. As we heard in episode 12 with Louisa Velarde, being parentless is like an island, and I don't know how to swim. Thank you for being my life jacket.
My name is Danielle Remigio. I use she, her pronouns. I am a student affairs educator by vocation. So I have my master's in college student development. And I work in Boston at Northeastern University right now. So that's really exciting and awesome. But my bigger passion, especially now, is working with people and training and talking about grief and emotion and how we cope and how we work with one another during those tough times. So I've been working on trainings and writing and just trying to make sure that my reach is out there, because I feel like I have some experience that can be relevant to a lot of other people. So that's why I'm here. So thank you for having me.
Tell me, why are we here and who is your person?
Yeah, so I unfortunately have people that I wanted to talk about, but I'll start with my mom. So I am currently 33, but when my mom passed away in 2016, that would have made me 27, I believe. So my mom, one day I was on the phone with her, and the next she was in the hospital. She had the flu. And I remember getting to the hospital. I got called out of work, and the doctors told us that they were going to put her into a medically induced coma to try to help her lungs heal, because the flu had then exacerbated into a pretty nasty pneumonia. About 5 or 6 days later, she ended up passing in the hospital because her lungs were just too damaged and other organs started to fail, and there was just she wasn't going to be the same after that. And we don't think she would have been able to wake up. So I had to make that decision with my dad. I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger. So she was early 20s when this happened. And it definitely rocked our family, because she was definitely the stable force. My dad would joke that she gave him an allowance of the money he earned, because she was a stay-at-home mom for the most part. And he had no idea what she had saved, had no idea what she had put away, what policies she had, the whole nine. He's like, wow, she managed everything. So it was a lot of teaching him how to be independent. And obviously he worked independently. He was a police officer, but some of those day-to-day house things, like how to use a debit card and how to do simple things without your partner. They had gotten together when they were 15. So they had been each other's people for a very, very long time. They had just celebrated 30 years of marriage, and were doing really well. So it was really hard to see so much positive progress between the two of them, and then have my mom pass. 3 months after that was when my grandfather passed away, my dad's dad. So it kind of rocked us all over again, because it was just so soon after. And he was definitely the patriarch of our family. I come from a big Portuguese family, and he definitely was the bright shining star of everything. So it was really hard having 2 back-to-back services like that. And then just over a year later was when my dad passed. So yeah, in October of 2017, my dad was riding home on a motorcycle and was hit by a driver who went over the state trooper passover and hit my dad. So I was actually in a wedding down in North Carolina, and the next morning found out and flew home a day later after he passed. So that was early October 2017. So it was once again having to kind of pick everything up. And I felt like a lot of people were looking at me as the oldest of my sister and I, but also the oldest of all of my cousins on both sides. And so I was kind of that next step of what's going to happen. And it was a lot of pressure, and I was more focused on the logistics of a wake that was very intense and publicized on the news, that I was dealing with traffic patterns versus my own grief. So that made it a little bit more difficult. And I definitely wasn't focused on myself for a really long time. So, since then we've had to go to court over some things, and there's still some things going on with that. And it's been really triggering at times to have to relive some of the really tough details. But it was a very fast, very difficult 18 months where I lost a lot of really important people in my life. And since then, I've had to do a lot of reflection. So, yeah, that's why I'm sharing my story now.
Wow. Well, I have a lot of questions already.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a family?
I do not have kids of my own, but I do have a partner that I've been with for 2 years now. We've known each other for longer than that, but we've been together for 2 years.
Okay, so I was trying to get at, when all of this stuff was happening, were you single? Were you by yourself? Did you have to deal with that by yourself? Okay.
Yeah, so I was single, and when my mom passed away, I used to work in housing at colleges, so I was a hall director, so I lived alone. I lived where I worked, I lived alone, and had to kind of deal with it. When my dad passed away, I was living with a couple friends, actually in the city that he was a police officer in, so that was what was difficult. But yeah, I was single at the time of all of this.
Okay. All right. So let's take just a step back, and let's,
Sure.
what is your mom's name?
Amy.
I kind of look at dates and things. And so can you just give me maybe the month and the day that she passed away?
Yeah. So it was March 14th.
And what is your dad's name?
Louis, or Louis, Louis.
And you said October of 17.
Yeah. So it was October 9th. That's where the 9th came from. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep everything straight. And then, and then you said your grandpa that passed away, that was your dad's dad, right?
Yeah. To be honest, I don't remember the exact date, but it was late June of 2016.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm interested to, if you remember how your dad dealt with losing his dad.
Oh, that's really interesting, because I feel like I was more in tune with how it was connected to my mom passing. He was very family focused, dealing with logistics. My grandfather lived in Canada, so we ended up doing 2 services, one up there and one down here. And he was really focused on his 3 sisters and my great aunts and uncles that all lived up in Canada, and trying to make sure that that was okay more than anything. So I think part of it was just like bury your head down and get through it. But part of it was also recognizing my grandfather lived a really long life, and he had accepted that he was sick. He was in the hospital. And my grandfather had 12 grandkids and 4 children. And my grandmother passed when I was younger, but had a wonderful wife, and they lived in 3 countries and 2 continents. And there was more of an acceptance to, like, this is when things should happen. He was in his 80s. He lived a good life. So I think there was more peace when that happened.
I do find it interesting that you said that your dad kind of focused on all the details and everybody else. And you just told me that, you focused also on the details and yourself. So yeah, interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you remember, is there anything that you like smell, sight, taste, sound, anything that comes to mind when you think of your mom?
There's mannerisms that I do now, like the way that I'll stand at a bar or a countertop that's very similar to hers, or handwriting. Our handwritings are very similar. We're both left-handed, where I'll write something and it's a mix of print and cursive. As kid born in the late 80s, we still learn cursive. And it looks so much like her handwriting. And
how do you feel when you see that? Because I've had, not all the time, but sometimes I'll be like, oh, wow, that really looks like something. And so, how does that feel for you?
I like it. I actually found a card soon after she passed with her handwriting in it, just love mom. And I actually have that tattooed on me to always have her handwriting on me because it was very distinctive. So those things, there's also like whenever sarcasm really comes about, she was a very sarcastic, dry humor type of person, kind of sat back and observed more than spoke up and would just kind of make quips and comments about things. But I think I really feel it when there's like babies around because she always just loved children and being around children and family. So I can feel that sense of calm around other family members that reminds me of her. And it's just very comforting because I feel like, we always joke that, you become your parents or you become your mom. And I think I've gotten a really good balance of both of them in me. So when something happens that I recognize, it's refreshing.
What about your dad? Any smell, sight, taste, or sound?
Yeah, definitely some music, certain songs that I know he would really like or songs that I know he did enjoy. He had the most eclectic taste in music, everything from show tunes to, oh my God, Aerosmith and Queen and Andrea Bocelli and like pretty anything, Carrie Underwood, Grace Potter and the Nocturnals, like literally end to end. He was just such an enigma of extremes. And if you looked at him, you wouldn't expect it because he was a 6'3", muscular, tall, like masculine looking person who loved show tunes. So it was like a very big disparity, but he just enjoyed everything. Also his police badge number. So 193. I also have that tattooed on me. I see it everywhere. So license plates, I see license plates everywhere. So whether it's 193 for him, 23 for my mom, because her birthday was May 23rd. Those things I always stick out. So when I see it, I'll usually just like talk to them for a little bit, especially if I'm driving in my car. But the 193 is everywhere. My partner got a new car and we didn't pick out his license plate and it had 193 in it. And I stopped dead in the parking lot because neither of them met him. And it was just a really strong sign, like, okay, this is where I should be in life. And it was just really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And not that this means anything, but I mean like October 9th also, and the 193. Yeah, see, I don't know. It might all just be coincidences, but I like to look at numbers. So
same.
Did your dad have dad jokes or anything like that, or sayings? Both your mom and your dad, anything that you remember?
My dad, whenever he would miss something, like forget, or he couldn't find his keys, or if he couldn't like get to a solution of something, he would joke that that's why he was an officer and not a detective, like making a like joking that he wasn't smart enough, which was ridiculous. He was very intelligent. He was like, that's why I'm an officer, not a detective. And he would just joke about it. Take it easy, take it easy. But he would say it in this like thick Portuguese accent.
Can you kind of recreate that for me?
Oh my gosh. So he would like just big personality, would be joking or someone would be all riled up and he's like, Faju, take it easy. And like this huge thing. And we have it on like t-shirts and everyone like loves it, but it's just like big, warm type of energy is totally him. My younger cousins love it and find it hilarious.
Did your parents have a nickname for you?
No. I wasn't a big nickname person. Some kids when I was in elementary school called me Danny. That didn't really last long. But no, they just called me Danielle. My younger sister is Alexandra, and her friends call her Allie. My parents called her Alex. So family calls her Alex. And my mom would call her Alexandra during stern moments. But no, I've never been much of a nickname person. So that was it.
You mentioned your sister being younger than you and you kind of taking care of a lot of things. So how do you feel like your relationship is now when it's just you, basically?
Yeah, it's better now. I think because she was living in our childhood home when my dad passed. So there was a lot of logistics about, making sure the mortgage was getting paid and bills and all these things that she didn't have to pay attention to because my parents had it, that I had to take over. And there were decisions that had to be made and making sure things were being budgeted and that I was kept in the loop because I didn't live there. And that caused a lot of stress where our relationship turned from sibling to what seemed like a parent-child relationship. And that was very uncomfortable for both of us. Since selling the house and we've both moved into our own homes, things are so much better. We're able to communicate better. We're able to be our own people, make our own decisions. So when things aren't muddled or tied to some of those hard things, I think it's much easier for us to be our own people. And we're figuring things out. I think, we lost both parents before either of us turned 30, and we're both single. That takes a toll on what those next milestones are going to be and how you're going to live your life. And I think we're still figuring it out, but I think the communication is much more open now that the power dynamic doesn't seem to be there anymore. Because I didn't like it. She didn't like it. It seemed like a forced necessity, but I'm glad that part has kind of been settled because it was difficult.
I think I'd like to hear about what you've done with that grief and how you've gone forward and what you've just kind of learned. And then I think we'll go from there.
Yeah. I guess there's tangibles and intangibles to how I managed it. I'd say after my mom passed away, I did not handle anything well. I isolated. I wasn't talking to friends. I was really keeping to myself. I wasn't really as engaged in my job either. I think it was just apathy all around, was more angry. At that point, I wasn't in therapy. And then my dad convinced me to actually go see the therapist my mom had been going to, which was really helpful.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd you feel about that? Was a good thing?
Yes and no. I think at first it was wonderful because it was a way to process grief from someone who truly understood who my mom was. I think as time went on, so now I've kind of separated and I'm looking to shift gears a little bit. I wanted to be like therapy to be a little bit more about me and not my grief process. And I think the purpose was served with my past therapist. She was the most wonderful person. I have nothing bad to say, but I think having someone with that context was what I needed in that moment. So I saw her for, like 5 years. So I ended up seeing her, and it helped to start process and normalize what I was feeling a little bit. And ironically, my first appointment was the afternoon that I found out my grandfather passed away. So I was in there crying for a whole new reason. And she knew who my grandfather was and knew about him and everything. So it helped in that way too. So, when it came time to losing my dad, part of it was I work in emergency response. I have been on call for a very long time dealing with a whole various set of emergencies that college students face, from like medical emergencies, drugs and alcohol, to like dealing with death and everything else. So I think I went into emergency response crisis mode for a little bit just to get through the logistics. But one major difference was that I was really open about how I was feeling and I vocalized it. So I learned from keeping things bottled up before that it just wasn't healthy. If I was angry, I said I was angry. If I was upset or hurting, I said it. I was much more vocal at work about how things were affecting me. Like, it's a bad dad day. Like, I'm feeling it today. So if I'm off, that's why. And I think those things helped to create less tension in my life because people knew where I was at. They may not have understood or been able to fully empathize, but they understood clearly what I was feeling in the moment because I was able to make it very clear. I think that was the biggest lesson learned from all this, that the only way that people truly know how you're feeling is if you are open about it. Guessing is just not accurate or helpful. And that's really what I needed. I felt like I was able to process things and move forward a little bit faster than if I had followed the same route after my mother passed away. So yeah, that was the big thing. Plus, bigger things like we created a scholarship fund at my parents' high school because they went to high school together, specifically for students wanting to go into public service fields. Knowing that my dad was a police officer, my mom had worked and volunteered at hospitals and at our schools growing up and wanted us to be contributing members of any community we were a part of. So it's a small scholarship and we raise money every year, but it makes me feel good knowing that both of my parents are being honored that way to give back in small ways.
Yeah, I really like that. How you said they spent their lives giving to other people, and now you're kind of continuing that. That's really
trying to.
I also like how you mentioned it's a bad dad day because, in the States, of course, we're expected to go right back to work after something happens. A lot of people, they don't know on the other end, if it's not you, people don't know how to approach someone coming back from bereavement leave. Yeah. And so then even that person coming back to work, you don't want to answer the questions. You don't want to go through with that. So I really, really like that. It's a bad dad day. And you're right. Yeah. If we don't tell people can't read our minds, they're not going to know. So definitely, I really like that picture of letting people know. Parentless Podcast is available on many podcast platforms. Now, if you listen to podcasts, you can probably just go search the show and you'll be able to find it, no problem. However, some of those platforms do include Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Amazon, and that's just a few. Something that you can do right now is take a screenshot of the episode you're listening to at this very minute, post it to your Instagram story, and then tag me. If you know a friend or a family member that might find something helpful in the show, you can go ahead and tag them too, or just send them a message. Another simple way to help get the word out about Parentless Podcast is to rate, review, and follow wherever you're listening right now, especially on Apple Podcasts. Everything that I've researched, everything that I've heard, it says if you do this for me, it will help get the word out. That's what they say. So let's test it, right? If we don't have the reviews, we won't know. Please come, please help, please review. Thank you so much for your continued support of Parentless Podcast. Hey there, welcome in. I want to let you in on this idea that I heard about when I sat down with Tim Harris from Grieving is Breathing. Tim said, "Hey, Stephanie, I have this idea." And I said, "Hey, Tim, what is your idea? Please tell me." He said, "Stephanie, it is my goal for 2022 to bring at least one person free therapy for 1 year." And as soon as I heard that, I said, "Tim, I am in. Tell me, what can I do? How do we work on this goal together?" Tim said that people can visit the website, www.grievingisbreathing.com. You can play around there, explore, see what's there. But if you want to help with the specific goal of getting one person free therapy for 1 year, you can find the donate tab and you can click that. Also remember, the word of mouth is a powerful thing. You can reach Timothy Harris at grievingisbreathing@gmail.com. Also on Facebook and Instagram of the same name. Let's help Tim pay it forward. So have you done anything else for the community after your dad passed away?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest thing, and I know this how we connected because I was sharing it out, was in March of 2021, so just a few months ago, I was able to go back to my undergrad institution, my alma mater, to give a TED Talk. And it was probably one of the most gratifying experiences that I've had in a very long time. I was able to give a talk on my grief story, so a little bit about what we've talked about here, as well as providing tools to help not necessarily the person grieving, but the people in the communities that are witnessing or being a part of that grief process. So I called it Cleaning Up the Grief Process, with the acronym being CLEAN, CLEAN, with different parts of how to help someone who's going through major change and loss. So the acronym stood for connect, listen, empathize, accept, and normalize, with just little tidbits of things that I had experienced, along with some psychological and sociological research, as well as some higher ed student affairs theory in there as well, to ground myself in what I do for a living. And I thought it was a really good balance of empathy and structure, which is kind of my jam, of how I operate in my job and just in my life. And I felt like it was a really good, clear message of grief isn't about the person who's going through it. One of the visuals that I presented was you're looking into a mirror of what your future is going to be. And being the nerd I am, I compared it to the mirror Erised in Harry Potter. And that mirror shatters when someone passes or a major thing in your life doesn't go the way you expected and you're grieving. And at the end of my talk, I shared that the person who's grieving is doing the heavy lifting and is sweeping up those pieces, and they just need someone else to hold the dustpan, and they just need a little bit of help to get by. No one is expecting the community to do all the work. It's still an internal process, but it makes it a lot easier if you have someone there just to support even the smallest bit. It doesn't take the world. It's the small moments and the small connections you can make. So I was able to do that in March. And since then, it's opened up some opportunities for me to have experiences like these on your podcast and luckily a couple others. And I want to be able to speak to people or have groups or workshops and trainings around similar topics to try to move forward in a really positive way. But yeah, that was such a cool experience of being able to plan and do that and give that.
Well, I really liked watching that. You were very calm and collected. And I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume, but there wasn't an audience there, was there?
So interesting. This is behind the scenes that no one really knows. The first time we recorded it, there was an audience. There was an issue with some of the filming and we had to go back and refilm. So the one that's on YouTube is the refilm, and that didn't have a formal audience. But we did. Yeah. I forget how many people were. It was restricted because of COVID-19, but we did have some people. The university president was there, which was really cool as an alum, and some different people that I know, some professors and some students. So, but the one that's on YouTube is very, very similar, just without the audience there.
Nice. I liked that.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably always going to remember, to me, I'm going to say, will you hold the dustpan? Like, are you going to be that person who's there helping? So I'm stealing that, just by the way. And so in your experience, has there been someone who has held the dustpan for you in these times?
Oh my gosh. Well, obviously my partner, he's experienced his own grief and loss in the past, and he's very good about understanding how I operate. So even if it's, hey, how do you want to honor your mom or your dad today on those anniversaries of their passing or their birthdays? And I do the same for him. I'd say I have some really amazing longtime friends from high school and mostly from college that are just really great at connecting. Most of my friends from college live in Connecticut. And when both of my parents were in the hospitals, they drove up, skipped work. One of my friends is a teacher and was like, I need to figure out how to take time off to be here for you because you're family. We all have had the mentality that family doesn't have to be by blood, and it's chosen just as much. So I definitely have some really strong support. And it's not just, I think what makes it strong is it wasn't just when it happened. It's all the time. I don't feel judged if I'm having a bad mom day or a bad dad day. It's just how it is that day. And I can go to them and they're there with open arms to hear about it. And that's definitely been some of those small dustpan moments.
When you're deep in your grief, you are having a bad mom day or a bad dad day. Mm-hmm. What do you do to kind of help you?
I'm a big music person. Unfortunately, don't have much musical talent, but I love listening to music and connecting with lyrics and, picking things that I know either connected to my parents or just things that I really enjoy. One of the ones that I talk about in my talk is Sarah Bareilles is probably one of the most influential musicians in my life, and has every album just seems to fit with where I am in my life. So it's just been really inspirational. So I tend to throw her on lately. It's been Taylor Swift or Adele and, just their new stuff that's out. But I also write. I've always been a writer, even since I was a kid. I'm trying to write a book right now, slow going, but I'm trying to write a memoir based on these experiences. So being able to process through writing has been really helpful, just to get it out of my head. I feel like I write better than I speak sometimes. I need to get it down in writing, pen and paper, and it kind of releases a little bit. Yeah, those are the two big things, music and writing.
From your TED Talk and just all of your experiences, is there I think you might have already mentioned it, but a big takeaway that you would like to share with other grievers?
Yeah. Don't hide. Share where you're at. Be honest about how it's affecting you, because you're not the only one. You're not the only one that's gone through something. Everyone has their own individual grief story. Not everyone has the same relationship with their parents that I did. I'm blessed to have a really strong relationship with my parents, and that I grieved the way I did so strongly. But it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be a grandparent or a friend or anybody else in your life, or it doesn't have to be death. Grief isn't just death. It's a loss of a job when money is tight, or a loss of an opportunity that you're really going for. All of those things are grieving processes and opportunities. And I think grief is just as much a process as it is an opportunity. Because if we don't process what's going through our head and going through that loss, then it's just going to be bottled up and it's a wasted opportunity. I feel like grief has afforded me the opportunity to recognize what actually is important in my life. I spent a very long time only working and putting a lot of effort into my job. And since then, I have reevaluated some of my, the things that are most important in my life, my priorities. And I don't regret that. I'm still able to be the professional that I am while being a more authentic version of myself. So don't hide and go through the process are my two big takeaways.
You mentioned therapy.
Yeah.
So just tell me, you kind of mentioned your experience there a little bit with therapy. Is there anything else that you kind of want to bring around with that?
I don't think that therapy needs to only be when things are going wrong. It's been a few years since both of my parents passed. So the existential dread that comes with that is so heavy at the beginning. And I feel like it doesn't get any lighter, but you get stronger to carry it through those experiences. So I think sometimes therapy and the goals of therapy change, and it's okay to just go to check in and reevaluate. Am I still on the same path? Am I doing what I need to? A little bit of external validation while looking inside yourself. So there were times where we weren't talking about my parents. Honestly, we spent a lot of time talking about my job and how that was affecting me more so than the grief sometimes. And I think it helped to not just be like, I'm going to go to therapy to fix this one problem, because usually it's going to spiral into something else that you didn't even recognize was something you needed to talk about. And it's not about fixing things. It's a conversation. And I wish that we had a better healthcare system to be able to afford everybody the opportunity to go to therapy or be in positions where they felt like they could be more open about their mental health. I know that's not the situation we're necessarily in, so I'm privileged to have the insurance I do that can cover it. But I'm glad that I've been able to take advantage of it, because it has been very instrumental to me being able to communicate my feelings in a much healthier way.
So in your job, you were helping people before your parents passed away, and then you had this experience. Do you feel like anything changed in how you helped people, or can you just relate more, or how does that look for you?
A little bit of both. So my job has shifted a little bit. So I used to work specifically in housing. So I would work with students who lived on campus through any of the issues that they had. Now I work just in the back end when a report is filed, when something's going wrong. But I'd say both. I've been able to have conversations with students that they've lost a parent, or they lost someone in their lives, or they have been dealing with a level of addiction on their own, or they're living on the total opposite side of the world as the rest of their family, and it's COVID and they can't go home. So all of those things have affected their experiences. I'd say now I move a little bit slower. I'm not as solution focused, whereas before I'm like, all right, we have to follow the protocol. We have to hit these steps. I need to write this report. I'm going to follow up with you, and I'm still going to have empathy, but I'm going to move pretty quick. Now I'm okay taking a little bit more time to be like, how is that affecting you? Like, let's talk about this a little bit more. And depending on the situation, sometimes I'll share a little bit of my story, just so they don't feel like they're alone. If I can tell they're kind of feeling isolated, and, relating and not comparing. Be like, I've gone through similar experiences. I'm a little bit older than you, so I know it's different, but I recognize that it can be very lonely. Let's talk about resources. So, it's a little bit more intentional, where I have the experience versus before I was leaning more on my years of training and protocol to guide me. Now it's more based on instinct.
You had mentioned too that you have a lot of milestones coming up, possibly.
Yeah.
And then, you won't have your parents there. So have you, you told me you're still figuring that out. That's not a fair question.
Well,
never mind.
No.
You have an answer. Okay, go ahead.
I do. Who knows what's going to happen in the future, but I would say, it definitely is tough going to weddings, and seeing like the traditional father-daughter dance, when my dad and I at weddings would dance around the dance floor together, doing like the waltz and the foxtrot and everything, because I would practice with him as a kid. So it's tough knowing that I won't be able to recreate those things the same way. And, not having either parent as grandparents if I decide to have kids, that's really difficult because we come from a really big family. So, there's definitely a hole in my heart a little bit knowing that those things won't be filled, but, I'm looking at how to do it differently. How, if I eventually get married, how am I going to honor them, and how am I going to celebrate versus, come from a place of negativity and grief of what's missing versus what's still here. So, just trying to be intentional with it. It doesn't make it easy, and you never know what the future holds. I never would have expected this would have happened to me. My dad was 10 times healthier than I am, and I'm not necessarily an unhealthy person, and this still happened to him. I wouldn't have expected it, but plan for the worst, hope for the best, and keep good people around me, and it's worked out so far.
I don't know if there's a question here, but I feel like we need to address it. Everybody, when they pass away, it's different situation. And, you had your mom who was sick, and then your dad was completely different situation. Can you speak to just the differences of the two, or how you kind of felt about that?
Yeah, both were quick and unexpected. I guess the hard part was it was easier to explain that my mom got sick in the winter. She got the flu. Multiple people that year had the exact same thing, where it was the flu that turned to pneumonia and people were hospitalized. It was very intense. She had been a smoker. There was already lung issues there. So it was like, I was angry at her because I felt, at one point I blamed her for, like, if you were healthier, it wouldn't happen. And I don't think that's fair. And that faded very quickly. With my dad, I'm still angry about that, I would say, to a degree, because it was something that was very avoidable, considering, my dad was a Massachusetts and New England state trained motorcycle rider. So if he could have avoided what happened, it would have happened. So it felt really difficult to process because an external force caused something that didn't need to happen, versus I think we all can relate to illness in some way. Like, you recognize that sickness happens, things get worse, sometimes you don't recover, where it just seems so unfathomable. And it kind of, I felt like I was a 30,000 foot view looking down on myself at the hospital. Like, this is crazy. Like, this isn't happening. This isn't happening again. It's only been 18 months. That's no. So I think the quickness between the two the quickness of both of them passing. But the difference is, I think it was just internal versus external. And it was difficult.
Yeah, I think you got to hit it on the head there is the differences that I was trying to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also said that you still have some stuff that's still going on for your dad. Mm-hmm. So this is still kind of in your face. Not that it's ever going to go away, but it's still just right there. So
yeah,
that's tough.
It is, especially when it was so public. Like I gave the eulogy for both my parents, and my dad's was broadcast on the news. So that
I want to talk about that a little bit. I did. In your TED Talk, you mentioned that it was so public, and so I did a little looking around, and I did see that. And so, was it so publicized just because of how the incident happened, or what?
I think so. It just kind of took off. Like there was an accident that happened that wasn't typical. And I think that got some extra publicity because it affected more than just my dad and his motorcycle. There was a couple other cars that were involved too. Plus he was an officer with multiple life-saving medals, high regard at a police station after working there for 30 years. So I think it just got some attention to the point where, news trucks were following me around and wanting to interview me and my friend, like my neighbors and all this stuff. It was intense.
Yeah. I was going to say, did you have any choice in the matter? Like, sounds like not.
No, people were calling the hospital trying to get to me and pretending to know me. And it was really like different news stations. And
so just FYI for anybody that might be listening, even though it's not going to change the world here, but don't do that.
Yeah, no.
Don't be a jerk. When you gave the eulogy that was so public, I mean, did you have any choice in that though? Like, could you have just said no? I mean, you already did it for your mom, so like, I don't know how you could not do it for your dad.
Yeah. No, I knew I had to give the eulogy. Like I gave it for my mom and my grandfather and my dad. And my dad's was the hardest to write. I think partially because I think I was just exhausted and I hadn't eaten for like a week because of everything. But also, because of the media and because I knew it was going to be broadcast, I needed to be careful about names that I used or if I shared certain things because I didn't want other people to be followed or for something to happen. So I had to be really careful about what was said. And I still think I honored him the best that I could. So I don't think I sacrificed anything. It was just a couple tweaks. It definitely made it difficult after because I felt like some people recognized me from that, at least for a short while. Now it's years, so it's older news. But it was uncomfortable. I was told, if it's not broadcast live, where one camera can be used for multiple TV stations, then cameras will be in your face as soon as you leave. Like we can control it better if there's something in the church. And so that was kind of the compromise that we made. And I'm like, fine, I'm not going to say anything egregious in here anyway. He deserves to be honored. I don't know. I'm exhausted. Let's just do it. So we ended up having a much more private burial in the spring because obviously it was getting colder, where it was a little bit more controlled with just the people that were very close, which felt a little bit more comfortable. So that didn't have as much oversight and media and all sorts of things. It was just us. And that's, I think, what we needed to close it out.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was that your mom passed away of the flu. And now we know that COVID is here and the whole COVID's just like the flu. Like, how does that make you feel?
Oh, I get very angry. It's very frustrating to know that people are so willing to just like, well, I'm healthy. It's fine. It's not, the flu can affect people in different ways. COVID can affect you in different ways. Yesterday I found out that a coworker of my dad's that I've known since I was a kid passed from COVID, and it's very difficult. Another one that's about my age that worked at the station last year got it right at the beginning. and now is on a kidney transplant list. And he's my age. He's mid-30s, maybe a little bit older. So I think, just because you think you're safe doesn't mean you are. And to only think about yourself is potentially harming someone else. I understand that some people may have reservations because things have moved very quickly, but I know I was first in line whenever I could get a vaccine to get a vaccine, because I knew that if I could do anything to not only help myself, but the people that I care about, I was going to do that. And I know my mom would have been the same way. She would have done her research and she would have made sure that she was taking care of herself and her family. So I get very frustrated when people try to just downplay it, because you don't know what someone else is going through. You can't look at someone and know what their immune system is like or what their health problems may or may not be. And I think it's small-minded to assume that, just because you don't take medication or you don't take XYZ means that you're going to be okay when the next thing hits. And I've been very aware of how I'm interacting with other people. And, it goes back, my parents gave back to other people. This is just as much as part of that as anything else.
Have you kind of used that knowledge to encourage people to get vaccinated and to just take precautions or anything?
A little bit. I try not to push too much because I know I can't necessarily always change everybody's mind. And I know that. All I can do is share my experiences and what I've learned from that. So I know some people are hesitant about the flu vaccine because it may not carry every single strain, or it may not help everyone. Or they just kind of downplay it. And I'm like, that's how my mom died. And it was something as small as like, oh, well, I have the flu, I'll be better. You don't know. So some people will crack jokes about it, and that bothers me more than it probably would have. Or when people joke like, well, I have a good immune system, nothing's going to happen to me. And I'm like, well, my dad did too. And something happened that was out of his control. So be mindful of that when you're downplaying or upplaying your own health and well-being and how you choose to take care of yourself.
Mm. And what's the response that you get when you throw that out?
Sometimes I get frustrated because I feel like the only way that some people will listen is if they hear a direct story. But hey, if it works, it works. If I can help one person make a good decision for themselves, I'll be happy. I know it's not going to be everyone, but I'll take what I can get. It's all I can handle and all I can control.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I like to ask is, and this is not in a way of if you had any regrets or anything like that, but just if you had another day with your mom or your dad, what would you say to them?
Oh gosh. With my mom, definitely. Because her and I think, I had mentioned before that I was very, very in my work, and that was it before she passed. And she had noticed that and was saying things, and I was getting very defensive, and it caused some friction and some tension between us. Not to the point where I wasn't seeing her or anything. We still talked all the time, but it was definitely a little bit bumpier than it could have been. And I think I probably, especially now, thank her for seeing the future and knowing that I needed to do certain things. She always seemed to know what I was going to want a couple of years before I did. And that even went for fashion sense, would buy me a pair of pants. I would hate them. 3 years later, I would wear them. It just happened. Yeah. So I think just for her to know how much influence she's had, because I think sometimes she felt like she was the quiet one of the relationship. My dad was very loud, and she wasn't forgotten the way that she may have thought she was. So I would definitely do that. With my dad, honestly, our last interaction was awesome and very positive. So I don't know if I would change that. He had told me that he would drive me to the airport for the wedding I was going to, and he was going to be picking me up the day he was in his accident. I was supposed to be flying home, and he was going to get me. And And it was like 4:30 in the morning because I was catching a really early flight. And the whole time we talked and laughed and listened to music and shared things. And I think I thanked him for driving me maybe 10 times. And he's like, of course, of course. And it was such an us conversation and time to be driving early in the morning, talking about work or whatever else. And there was such a good camaraderie and a lot of respect and a lot of love. And it was very authentic. And as much as it's sad that was the last time I saw him, because I was expecting that he'd pick me up in a couple days, I cherish that was our last conversation because it was so easy and so full of love, and I'm really grateful for that.
I also have to know, so then what happened? Well, if you don't want to answer this is fine. But I mean, you're expecting for him to pick you up at the airport, and then how are you notified? I guess. Yeah. What'd you do?
My dad's police station called me, and I was at the brunch the morning after the wedding. And I walked outside because I noticed I had a voicemail, and I'm like, why are they calling me? And I was very confused. And it was saying that my dad had been in an accident and I need to call back and get home immediately. And they were doing everything trying to get me on earlier flights, including like calling connections at the National Guard, like trying to get everything together. So I had to immediately leave like 10 hours before my scheduled flight, 12 hours, I think. And I ended up getting on an earlier flight. And when the plane like pulls in and there's that like tube that like connects to the plane for you to disembark, there were officers waiting there to pick me up. And they made an announcement on the plane for me to get off before everybody else, so I could immediately get shot to the hospital. They still had not told me what happened, except that he was in an accident. So I'm like, well, now I kind of know. I kind of knew what was coming. And I remember sitting in the car, in the cruiser, mentally writing parts of my eulogy, even though I had no idea what had happened because no one would tell me. I think they were afraid of what my reaction would be in an airport, states away. So yeah, it was a lot to try to get back there.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably a moment when, these people are definitely trying to get you back home and doing all of that stuff that you kind of have to be like, this might be a little strange. Is there anything that we haven't said about your parents that you do want to share?
I would say if there's one thing I want to put out in the world is that I had parents who balanced helping me learn how to be my own person while grounding me in family and community and what that actually means. So being welcoming of the friends I had in my life and welcoming them into our home like family, or how to value or talk about family, whether or not we're super close or not. They were willing and open to have those conversations with me. What I wanted to follow in terms of our Catholic faith, and if that was for me, and not judging if that's not what I wanted to continue doing. Confirmation was my choice because it was my confirmation. It wasn't, you have to do this, even though I come from a Portuguese Catholic family. So everything was grounded in, this is your life. This is what we're instilling in you, and we trust you. And I think it has made me a much stronger person that values things differently because it wasn't forced on me. And I'm just grateful. And I know I have a lot of them in me, and I'm proud of how I've tried to put that out into the world.
Very nice.
Thank you.
That you brought up your religion.
Yeah.
So that's one of the, and I don't know why this doesn't even tie to it. Like religion doesn't equal signs, but that's my question. Do you believe in signs, and have you seen any, if you do?
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned before, so seeing my dad's badge number on things is definitely a sign. One time I was driving back from, I think, running bank errands after they both passed away, and 3 songs in a row, the lyrics of the songs were "Everything's going to be all right." Literally 3 songs in a row on 3 different stations, because I would click through. Yep. All right. I see you. I hear you. And then a double rainbow is a big sign for my mom. On the day of her funeral and wake, it was actually because it was St. Patrick's Day weekend in Boston, and there was a huge double rainbow that just was literally, there's pictures over the city of Boston, full bright double rainbow. Yeah. And then in terms, I know a lot of people think of like birds as signs. The red cardinal always shows up, and it showed up the day that my mom went into a coma, where my sister was at my aunt's house. She saw a red cardinal in the driveway right as that was like about to happen. And then blue jays for my dad have shown up a lot. So we noticed those things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like the songs, especially you mentioned that you switched the stations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. How can we find you if you want to be found?
Yeah. So I have an Instagram handle, so at DL_Remigio. So DL_ my last name, Remigio. I'm putting some things on there related to grief and just my own experiences and specific to that process there. And then I also have a website, so just DanielleRemigio.com, where I'm going to be sharing my personal writing as well as opportunities to reach out to do any workshops or facilitation or trainings, whether it's just a group session wanting to talk about grief and connection in your community, or if you have grief or loss or any major change that you want to talk to in the workplace, I would definitely love to come in and talk to you. So I have some like facilitation guides up there as well. So those are the two main places you can find me at.
Well, thank you. I am super interested in the grief in the workplace conversation, but we will direct people to find your other podcasts that you've been on, because
definitely.
You've said that conversation is there. So definitely a lot of good information for us. Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we kind of let go?
I would just say thank you for the opportunity to have me on. I think, opportunities like these come up when you live your authentic self, and that seems kind of hokey, but I think if I hid in my own grief and kept it in my own circles, opportunities like this wouldn't have come up to be able to share my story and hopefully connect with some of your listeners. And hopefully I'm able to connect with some of them too. We're all in this together, even in small ways.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much. Again, if you want to listen to her TED Talk, what is it called?
Cleaning Up the Grief Process.
And always remember to be somebody's dustpan. That's amazing. I love that. Hi, welcome to today's podcast spotlight. Before I get into the shows, I want to make a little note here. I was talking with Danielle about being someone's dustpan. I want to correct that. And if you listen to what we talked about earlier, we said it then. It's not about being the dustpan. It's about holding the dustpan. So just wanted to make that clear. All right, this week's podcast spotlight features not one, but two podcasts. And that's because our guest, Danielle Remigio, is featured in both of those podcasts. So the first show that you want to check out is called Amplify Ambition with Kristen Edwards. Episode 60 is called Growing Through the Grief Process with Danielle Remigio, and that's the episode you're looking for there. The next show is called Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between with Kendra Rinaldi. Episode 91, I Was Done Putting Up a Front with Danielle Remigio. Please go check out these shows, listen to what else Danielle has to say, and as always, please remember to rate, review, and follow, and also tell your friends about all of these shows. Thank you so much for your support, and take care. I am not a good dustpan. You know what? I like to sit here and say, oh, do what you can, go listen to people, go talk to people. And then like when it happens, it's someone that I know, I'm just like, what do I say? Oh, I'm thinking of you. I still don't, I'm not really sure what to say, but so yeah, I really appreciate people who are sharing their stories and doing the work for others. It stinks that, those things had to happen to you for you to be able to share it with everybody else. But thank you so much that this is the route that you're choosing to go. It's very helpful.
I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Parentless Podcast is recorded in Phoenix, Arizona. Find us on social media and most major podcast platforms. Music provided by Colin Lococo and the Revolving Birds. Studio and editing provided by Back Home Media and Ian Relaford. Check out one of the many shows on our network. I am your host, Stephanie Relaford.